Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly a pretty radical idea. What would happen if you just stopped reading for an entire week? It's an experiment called reading deprivation, and it's all about seeing what happens when you finally unplug your brain from that constant fire hose of information. But before we get into it, let me ask you something. Does your brain ever feel, well, like this? Kind of like an overstuffed closet where everything's just jammed in there and you can't find a single thing you're looking for? In our always on 24/7 culture, this is pretty much what's happening to our minds. And it's really no surprise, right? We've basically become professional information consumers. I mean, from the second we wake up, we're just taking it all in. Emails, news alerts, social media feeds, even subtitles on TV. This constant stream, it leads to what you could call information fatigue, where you almost can't remember the last time you had a truly original thought of your own. And that brings us right to the heart of the problem we're going to tackle: our overstuffed minds. How do we actually clear out all that clutter? How do we make some space for our own ideas to finally grow? Well, the answer, which was first proposed in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, is something called reading deprivation. And the idea is, it's simple, but it's also pretty wild. A 1-week break from all reading and all media input. And yeah, that means no books, no news, no scrolling through social media. Absolutely nothing. And this quote really gets to the why of it all. See, the goal isn't to become less informed or anything like that. It's about silencing that constant, nonstop stream of other people's ideas so that your own output, your thoughts, your creativity, your own inner voice finally gets some room to breathe. Okay, so let's talk about the art of unplugging. What is this practice actually for? And maybe more importantly, what can you expect if you're brave enough to try it? You can think of it as a complete system reset for your brain. It's designed to break that habit we all have of using reading or scrolling to procrastinate or just kind of numb out. Suddenly, you can't distract yourself with someone else's words, which forces you to actually have a conversation with your own inner voice. And here's the fascinating part. Without all that external fuel, your brain gets bored. And when it gets bored, it starts generating its own creative sparks. It's a pretty brilliant way to see just how dependent we've all become on that constant stimulation. But let's be real for a second. While the promise of all this sounds amazing, the reality of it can be intense. As one person put it, in practice, it can feel like a mild form of psychological warfare. So yeah, this is not exactly a peaceful, relaxing retreat. Which brings us to this crucial contrast, right? The promise of this practice versus the really tough reality that a lot of people face when they actually give it a shot. So on the one hand, the promise is everything you see here: mental clarity, a huge boost in creativity, a stronger connection to your inner self. But the reality, especially in those first few days, is often, well, it's the stuff on the right. Instead of clarity, you get what's called the reflexive twitch. You're just constantly reaching for your phone out of pure habit. Instead of a creative surge, you get hit with this wall of extreme boredom, anxiety, and even a surprising feeling of being totally isolated. So what does a week of this actually feel like? Well, days 1 and 2 are all about that reflexive twitch. Your hand just goes for your phone without you even thinking about it. Day 3 is often peak boredom. The empty time just feels massive, and that can make you pretty anxious. But then, something often shifts. Around day 4 or 5, a lot of people report this breakthrough moment, a sudden surge of energy or a flood of new ideas. And there's a reason for this. When your brain isn't busy processing new information, its default mode network kicks in. That's the part tied to creativity and deep thinking. So that boredom, that's actually your brain getting to work on itself. By the end of the week, your own voice feels way clearer, and you can go back to reading with a whole new sense of purpose. Now, if you want to go all in, we're talking hard mode. Here are the rules. No books or articles, that's obvious. No social media, no TV with subtitles. And this is the part that gets me. You're even supposed to avoid reading the labels on things, like your shampoo bottle. The one big exception? You can, and you absolutely should, still write. Journaling is a huge part of this. I know what you're thinking. That sounds incredibly difficult, almost impossible. But you don't have to jump straight into hard mode. The good news is, there's a much gentler way to ease into this whole thing. So if you're curious, here's a modified trial run. First, just choose your time frame. Instead of a full week, just try it for a weekend, maybe 2 or 3 days. Second, set your own rules. Maybe you don't cut everything out, just the recreational stuff like news and novels, but you still allow yourself to read for essential work.
And third, and this is so important, plan some alternatives. You have to fill that new empty space with something, whether it's journaling, going for long walks, drawing, or even just cleaning out that closet.
So, after hearing all of that, the big question is this for you? Is this kind of intentional silence and experiment that might actually fit with your own goals?
This quote, for me, is probably the most powerful takeaway from the whole thing. When you unplug, you don't just notice how noisy the outside world is, you're going to realize that you are much louder than you thought. The real goal here is to discover the strength of your own inner voice once you finally give it the quiet it needs to be heard. And that leads us to the final question, which is really the entire point of this whole experiment. What's waiting to emerge when you finally stop consuming? What ideas, what feelings, what big projects are just sitting inside you waiting for a little bit of silence?